We have a very special guest today, Mr. James Clad. He is former Assistant Secretary of Defense for South Asia, and today he is visiting our studio. We are going to talk to him about energy situation worldwide and more focused on India and South Asia. James, welcome to our studio.
It's really a pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you very much for coming.
Not at all. My pleasure.
So we are going to start with a global energy situation, where the energy stands today in terms of demand and supply globally. And then we are going to talk about India specifically.
Good. I'm glad about that. It's a very, very big topic, of course.
Sure.
But within the changes that are going on in the world energy scene, India and the subcontinent are increasingly important for reasons of demand and also for exploration. But let's just start very simply at the beginning. We're in a world right now where the big low-cost producers in OPEC, Saudis, the Emiratis, are doing their very best to drive American shale production out of the picture. They think that by reducing the price, they'll drive a lot of American firms to the wall. Some of this is happening. People are having to refinance, and the number of rigs, for example, drilling for shale in the U.S. has dropped from about 1,500 to 450. But the point is that number of wells are receiving the same production. So the net effect until now, cross our fingers, is that the contribution by American shale to both oil and gas continues without change. But of course, it's getting harder and harder for these companies to make a profit. Some of them have hedged. You'll be aware of all the games that we can play for hedging, derivatives, financial intermediation. But if the price continues to be at below $60, it's really hard to do. So just to finish that thought, shale has been the reason why the United States has become the largest oil and gas producer in the world. Everybody's still surprised at that. You know, we think of the Middle East,
Sure.
But no, it's changed a lot. So that's the big news in the world of energy today. There are lots of other things going on, more efficient engines, more efficient buildings, solar, wind, but at the core of it is the petroleum economy, and right now we're seeing a big struggle between the low-cost producers in OPEC and American shale producers, and that's the thing that I'm watching.
So what do you think in the next, say, if you look at next 2 or 3 year horizon?
Well, it's a good question. At the Harvard Club tonight in Boston, I'll be speaking about this, and my prognostication is as they say in New York, you have an opinion, and that and $2 gets you on the subway, right?
Okay.
So none of us are experts, but it's important to remember that just 7 years ago, everyone said the United States was going to have to import a huge amount of LNG just to keep the natural gas industry going. That's reversed. Every one of those import terminals is now being re-engineered into an export terminal. Things change fast. So in that context, and keeping my fingers crossed, I think we're going to continue to have a lower price environment.
Even lower than the current
Lower
situation.
than lower than it used to be up to June last year.
Okay.
Remember how much it
Sure,
was? It was like
sure.
$140
Sure.
a barrel. Right now it's about 60, 65. I think at that level is enough to enable the shale industry to continue to produce, but there's a lot of adjustment. The key question I'm always asked is, what about prices at the pump? And I don't see those going up very sharply, except the consequence of some political developments that are going on in the world today.
Sure.
And as we know, the number one thing at the moment in Washington is the Iranian deal.
Sure.
And if Iran can unlock all of that oil and gas, then it's going to have a big impact on the world markets. The real question is how quickly. And the answer is they can't do it quickly because their investment has gone down so much over the last 35 years. So to answer your question, I think it's going to be about the same now for the foreseeable future, which means into next year.
Now, is it a good news for the developing countries?
Yes, it is. It's been good news for India. I mean, just do the math. I mean, it's now India's able to buy twice as much refined petroleum products than it was able to do in June last year. That's a big change, and very welcome, because India, as you know, has this chronic balance of payments problem all the time. Plus, you know, government, union government, and also state government debt. But in addition, India needs to apply its energy to the human energy to developing more on and offshore sources. We're seeing a bit of that, But the Indian market is very, very difficult.
So now let us stay on the Indian market
Sure.
and energy situation in India. The first blunt question is, how bad the energy situation in India is?
I was involved. I used to be a financial writer for the Far Eastern Economic Review, The Economist. I wrote from India beginning 25 years ago. Bombay, Mumbai, Delhi, all of these places, Hyderabad, And at the time, energy was a problem. The cost of it, the erratic supply of it, the need to have more reliable energy, electric power, right? And look what's happened since. The huge expansion of the middle class. Everybody used to buy a Maruti, now they're buying other things. So the need for oil, particularly, which is so linked to transport, has gone up like this. Electricity demand has gone up. Has India kept pace? No. And the answer is very complicated. It has to do with state jurisdictions. There's something called, as we all know, the state electricity boards, the SEBs. Yeah. They set the tariffs very low for populist electoral reasons. So you don't get a market that's very receptive and promises an easy, quick rate of return. So I think it's going to be even more of a problem in the future, because right now it's an intensification. It's the biggest single impediment to direct foreign investment in India, is the lack of reliable electric power.
Sure. Now, someone like you who is looking at India from outside, what India should be really doing to deal with this crisis?
Again, it's very easy for outsiders, foreigners, they do this, do that. The Indians know what to do. It's a complicated democratic system, but there does seem to be a sense of urgency now that Modi ji is in power as prime minister. I mean, this is a government which can really make things happen, probably more than the preceding government. Will they do what they need to do? You've got to raise prices across the board. You've got to cut out people who are illegally tapping into electric power. You've been inside Old Delhi.
Sure.
Look at that.
Yeah.
It's a spaghetti wire situation.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more than that. It's incentives for people to go exploring offshore. And it's been some time since those British companies like Cairn discovered in Gujarat and some of it offshore some of the petroleum finds. There's got to be a regular, reliable incentive system.
What about solar energy in India?
I think it's great, and I think that the changes that are underway. I mean, look, even in the United States, wind and solar have increased in their capacity quite significantly the last 3 or 4 years. It always surprises me when we have people at universities saying, let's take out university investment in oil companies. They don't look at the portfolio. Shell and Total and Exxon, ConocoPhillips, they have a big spread of renewable energy too. So they're looking for market opportunities in India.
Now, is the solar energy affordable in India?
I think so. It's all a question of scale, batteries, reticulation, proximity to end user. It's all a very local question. But we're getting to a point, and India should take a leaf out of the book in Africa, where if you go to southern Africa or Kenya, people now every night are reading by very effective solar lamps, which are put out during the day and cast a lot of light during the night. So solar power at the people's level is really making advances in Africa.
What about nuclear energy in India?
Well, of course, nuclear energy became like a flagship thing for the Indian government and for the Indian state a long time ago, right? The Atomic Energy Commission, then there was the so-called PNE, Peaceful Nuclear Explosion in 1974. The capability is there. In Mumbai, there's the BARC, it's called. It's over 10,000 technicians. Does all of that add up to a nuclear power capability that's being fully exploited? No. And a lot of this is political. A lot of this is the range of reactors that India has chosen. There's 4 different reactor types. And of course, whenever you're trying to set a standard, everybody wants their reactor to be ahead. So the short answer is, given what India knows and what it can do, I think the nuclear power option has really not been in play.
This also takes us now to overall South Asian market. And what do you think that what is happening in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka in terms of energy?
Well, it's a very good question. And one of the things I used to keep when I was in the Pentagon was a map of British India, 1938. Now, why did I do that?
Why?
I did that because I was interested in the infrastructure connections that was in that subcontinental economic area right? I mean, obviously the British did it for their own benefit, but railways, canals, telegraph lines, roads, they were all linked to the subcontinent. So the first thing to remember is it's an economic area that really needs political will to make people. Why? Because the market will be bigger, justifying the capital expenditure. Where's the big potential? Himalayas. Mm-hmm. The hydro, what the Bhutanese and the Nepalese are doing, but it's far short of what it could be. The second thing is the change of governments in Bangladesh and Pakistan in particular. Each new government will come in, they want to have independent power projects, that's what they call them, IPPs. Mm-hmm. And yet, of course, the politics take over and then it gets stuck and people want, obstruct it and the bureaucracy gets in the way. And then another government comes in and they have to start it again. Time is always lost with this. So actually, I tend to feel that India, of all of the countries in South Asia, easily has the expertise and the pent-up demand and the government that's willing to be very assertive, because nothing is more central to India than having plentiful energy in the way that's been delivered, with one major question mark. Mm-hmm. And that question mark is, does Prime Minister Modi really want to do to India's cities what the Chinese have done, which is burn coal and create an absolutely terrible urban pollution problem? Mm-hmm. And the answer is, I hope not. It's hard to have.
Is there a big reserve of coal in India?
Yeah, but the problem is it's kind of, I won't say dirty coal, but it's not the highest burning coal. It's not, what is it called? Anthracite. It's another type of coal. It's exported. Australian coal can be exported to India. It's better burning, but the real question is the Indian reserves of coal are huge, and of course if you're looking at your national accounts, you'd rather use something you have locally, especially given the trade unions in West Bengal and Bihar. So coal is there. Can you get clean coal? So far the American experience is very difficult. We have clean coal, quote unquote, clean coal plants. Indiana, that's Duke Energy. We have one in Mississippi and Southern Power. They're having a very difficult time with their best efforts to make coal-fired electricity delivery as competitive as gas.
Now, you worked in George Bush administration.
That's right.
And, we Indians often, we debate, that when is the U.S. has a good relationship with India?
During the George W. Bush administration.
But I'm going to explain, is it because some say, it's, the Republicans, we already have a good relationship with India, or Democrats, no, not so good. What is your take as an insider?
My feeling is that, let me tell you something. When I went with Secretary Gates and we went to see former Prime Minister, what's his name? Manmohan Singh. And he was asking, we were in the airplane and we were in Australia and Indonesia, and he said, anything else, after I'd given him the brief? And I said, yeah, if you are asked about the relationship, I said, tore, slowly. I said, don't hurry with this. I said, and so we were there, and the same question came up, and Secretary Gates said, Mr. Prime Minister, what can we do? We are fated to work together. And that's the best answer I can give you, is that India is a major world power. We are the greatest of great powers. We have common interests in making sure our Chinese friends don't push too hard. We have common interests in the abatement of nuclear proliferation, where India's record is very good. Missile technology, India's record is good. To work on those things and don't talk so much about it. We're democracy, you're a democracy. So what? Right?
Now, again, since you work in the Pentagon,
yeah.
My question is that how China and Pakistan play in this?
Not helpfully. I'm being very frank with you. The Chinese play a divide and rule game in many places in the world, and South Asia is one of them. They have given technologies that were prescribed to Pakistan over many years before. Nuclear technology, missile technology, not helpful, I think. All of it is to, in a sense, balance against India. On the other hand, India's relationship with China is now economically very, very substantial.
Yes.
I think Pakistan, even back in the late 1990s, had begun to miss the boat. The Indian rates of growth had overtaken it, even during the slower times under Vajpayee. But now it's very hard to see Pakistan continuing to do much more than it's doing now, which is important. It continues to survive as a state. But I think, Vajpayee and his national security advisor, Brajesh Mishra, they had a very good word for this. They would tell me, they say, we are going to take India out of the subcontinental box. And what they meant by that was this habit of saying Pakistan, India, or India inside South Asia. But to see India as a major country across Asia, certainly across Asia, and specifically globally. So that's where the interest is. We don't have to look for it. We don't have to talk about it. It's already there. And I think with the government we have now in Delhi, and the progress that was made with the visit of President Obama, and the specific things that are happening in the defense and security area, I'm very optimistic.
So what do you think could be an ideal solution to India and Pakistan problem, which has been going on for years?
I think
according to from the U.S. point of view.
Well, I mean, I can hardly speak for the United States, but my own view, having lived, I was a foreign correspondent, diplomat, I've been all over. I used to cross Wagah, the line of control, on the ground. And so here's my opinion. The best thing is to work against the national security mentality of the Pakistan military by just opening the boundaries for economic reasons, right? Each of the country has a national security elite that benefits from a state of confrontation. When you reduce that, there'll be big change. I mean, have you ever been to Rawalpindi?
No, I've never been to
You go there and you walk down the back alleyways, what are you hearing? Bollywood, there is the subcontinental understanding. Governments get in the way.
So do you think that this so-called Islamic fundamentalism in Pakistan and the military, it is more fiction than the reality on the ground?
No, I think they've played with dynamite for a long time. This began under Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Let's not forget. And all of that stuff. And of course, the mischief that the Saudi missionaries have played all over Asia was felt in Pakistan too. And then, as successive efforts to modernize, to do better, fail, it's easy to find a culprit, India. Dushman Agar, they're the problem.
Yeah.
Whereas the real issue is the problem of Pakistan. We used to say when we looked at Afghanistan that Afghanistan is a nation that's looking for a state.
Yeah.
Pakistan is a state that's looking for a nation. There's some truth in that.
Sure.
Because it's really held together by the military.
Yeah. Now, other question for you is, if you look at various sectors in Pakistan, for example, you look at the politicians, you look at the mullahs, you look at the common people, you look at the business groups in Pakistan. Which group or which section of the Pakistani community you think can play a major role in really improving ties between India and Pakistan, and for India too?
The middle classes, the urban, commercial middle class, the type of people who in India generally support the BJP, that type of people who think of commerce, who want to improve their markets, who aren't big zamindars, big landlords who are there, but their attitude is, let's see if we can expand our market. I mean, after all, Pakistan has some brilliant people. Many of them live in the United States now, right?
Sure.
The medical profession and things in particular.
Sure.
But they've been held back by the nature of their political economy, which is very exploitive.
So do you think the business can play a very dynamic, huge?
Absolutely. It's the only one that does. As they say, money talks.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that we're moving that way, but the state of semi-permanent crisis holds it back.
What about if you ask you three questions,
Sure.
or 3 points to make, for example, that first on energy, that India needs to do these 3 things in the next 5 or 10 years?
Okay, good question. And again, it's just my opinion.
Sure.
I think they need to liberalize access to the market, so have fewer permits. They need to lift the incentive so that a company can take the risk and go out and drill for oil. Thirdly, they need to explore the possibility of shale development, which is very complicated because the reason it's successful in the United States, everyone forgets, is because if you're a farmer in North Dakota or northern Pennsylvania, you have subsurface rights, right? It's very rare in the world today. But if you have subsurface rights, you can give a lease to a company, come in and drill, and receive a profit. It's a big incentive. Something like that needs to happen in India. And then beyond that, I think, with great respect to the democratic process in India, somebody's got to crack the whip about these state electricity boards. Some of them are just crazy. They don't get, and they're always having to be bailed out, and then the new government comes in and more populous provinces. People are getting free power. It will never work.
Yeah, the collection of revenue is
exactly.
very difficult there too.
And then remember the generating of the power, and then the reticulation of power, right, the grid, and then the incentives for people going in and doing that is very complicated. It seems to me that India really needs, and here's the final, I know it's more than 3, excuse me, but it needs more LNG, and that can come from Australia. It means receiving terminals and the pipeline projects to do it. And I have to say, we've been talking about this. You know, look, I've got gray hair now. I've been talking about this for a long time. Indians know what needs to be done. Find the political will and do it. I would never advocate what the Chinese do, that heavy-handed authoritarian thing. But somewhere in between has got to be the right approach.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for coming to our studio.
A real pleasure.